We demonstrated fraud in 2004. A lot of people think that, the 2020 election was fraudulent. I don't doubt it. I mean, I know that there would have been, there's always fraud in every election. Whether it was significant in Trump's election, sure seems likely that, Biden got a heck of a lot more votes than he should have.
This podcast is brought to you by the Average Intelligence Podcast and by the Arete Media Podcast Pantheon.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Arete Podcast. I am joined by Andrew Horning. Andrew, how many times have you run for Senate?
Nobody knows exactly. Scientists are still working on that. But no, I think I've run for Senate only twice as a full run, and then kind of an abortive attempt towards the GOP nomination. I jumped in late, and I didn't get enough signatures to get on the ballot for the GOP primary. So three times, kind of.
But twice as a Libertarian and once for a Republican?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. What order was that in, if you don't mind my asking? Like, was it Libertarian twice and then Republican, or how did that shake up?
It was the GOP was in the middle, kind of like what I did when I ran for U.S. House in 2004. I ran as a Libertarian before, and it was interesting, and that everything. When I ran as a Republican, I basically disproved everything everybody ever says about politics, because I raised less money as a Republican, got 10 times as many votes. And, the idea that people vote for the man, not the party. Well, that's baloney, because I was the same person saying the same things and getting 10 times as many votes as a Republican. Then I ran as a Libertarian again and got a tenth of the votes again. So,
yeah, I was going to say, whoever says that, I mean, that's just demonstrably not true. I'd wager to say even Trump wouldn't have won if he had run third party, although I don't know. He might have had a better go of it. Yeah, but he might have had a better go of it. But yeah, having the Republican or Democrat machine behind you is kind of the secret. That's why Bernie always runs as a Democrat.
Well, the other part to that is I was fighting the GOP the whole way. So once I won the nomination, I beat the slated candidate in the primary. And,
so you were set up for failure. You were set up for failure.
Yeah, and so I actually even had to grab the microphone well, I'm not going to get on all of those details, but bottom line is, if I probably would have won the election if only living people counted. So that was an interesting election.
And you said that was in 2004?
2004, and we documented fraud. So we went around and did a retrospective. Yeah, we did. It was simple retrospective analysis using one method we used for most of it was we just took pictures of boarded up houses that were boarded up after 1991. And that was because you could see the date on them. So after 1991, they would spray paint the date that they were boarded up. You can match that up against the voter rolls and then see how many people were voting from that address. Well, and this in inner city areas, I can guarantee this would work pretty much the same way anywhere. You could probably find it in any inner city area where you have a lot of homeless people and a lot of boarded up houses, that you're going to find they have an unusually high a high voter participation rate, generally about 110% or so.
And you said this is documented, obviously, because those are numbers that you can go by and check.
Yeah, we documented it. And what was fascinating is that the Indianapolis media didn't want to do anything with it. I mean, this gave kind of a very cursory sort of and then, Andy Horning says that there's some voter fraud, and then they might show a picture of it in a TV thing. The Indianapolis Star actually went a little bit further. They tried to debunk it. And they found one of the people that we had documented had moved to Ohio, and they went and they called her, and she said, "Well, I didn't even know I was not supposed to vote in Indianapolis anymore." And so they were saying, like, well, this kind of thing happens. People just don't know it wasn't intentional,
Sure.
But that's baloney. So. And that was just one thing that they tried to use to debunk the whole set of data we had. But as a result, the Wall Street Journal sent out a team of people to follow Andre Carson's people. No, it was Julia Carson's election, but Andre Carson was running the election, and followed him around on election day. And the Chicago Tribune did a story on it. But Indianapolis media was pretty lame. And it was the Indianapolis district I was running it. So they did not want to rock the boat.
Wow. Because I mean, you hear about that. That's particularly after 2016 and 2020, especially. You hear a lot of that, but to hear somebody point and say, "Yeah, no, this is what it was. This is how it happened, and we documented it." That's unreal. It makes it more real. Yeah.
Well, what's kind of funny is that we're not the first people that have done this. You just don't ever hear about it. In fact, LBJ's Box 13 scandal, that's pretty well known. How often is it that in one precinct 200 people vote in alphabetical order? That doesn't seem like a it seems
Also,
like that would
it also seems like you don't particularly care about being caught at that point.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of a side note.
So the genesis of this though was I saw a post on Facebook because I'm not trying to brown nose here, but every time you've been on my ballot, I voted for you, and I don't know if you remember this. You and I met.
You were the guy.
I was the guy. I don't know if you remember this. You and I met. What year would that have been? It was when Gary Johnson was running as Libertarian for president. Was that 2012 or was that 2016? I can't remember. I think it was 2012. Or maybe I can't remember, but I think you and I met in 2012. And
he was in Indianapolis both times, I think.
Yeah, so, yeah. And I just remember I reached out to you randomly because I had just learned about libertarianism and the Libertarian Party. And I reached out to you, and it basically turned into, yeah, let's grab a cup of coffee. And I think we sat and chatted for like an hour or so. And I was just asking, like, how do I get involved? And you were telling me all the things to do. And the big thing is to just tell people about the Libertarian Party, which segues into my next thing. For those of you watching who don't know what that word is, it's the first time you're hearing it, you have options. You have more options than you think you do. How viable they are is a matter of debate, but for the viewers, though, could you just go into and we can dig into some of the finer details later, but just the elevator pitch for the Libertarian Party?
That's a funny thing because elevator pitch always kind of, you're kind of making an assumption of where people's heads are at, and you want to meet them where they are. And so you kind of have to go for like basic, you go for certain issues. But libertarianism, if you just make it right down to the, just the crude element of it, it's that there isn't anything that needs restraining more than the restrainers, and that, government needs to be governed. And that the reason for that is that, if government isn't to make our lives better, to be freer and more productive and the sort of the peace, prosperity, and security thing. If government isn't there to make it good for us, then it's not worth having. And the libertarian angle on that is really anti-violence. It's not non-violence. It's anti-violence, no matter where it comes from. So the initiation of violence is often a phrase you'll hear in libertarian circles, where they say that we don't believe in the initiation, or you don't start trouble. Now it's okay for us to finish it. So the idea is that we're not the kind of people that are we're peaceniks in a way, but we're not afraid of a fight, and we believe in the right to keep and bear arms, and we believe that self-defense is one of the key elements of freedom, and that in that you want to use your force against those who would use force against you or initiate force against you. So that's kind of a complicated way of saying basically we don't believe in the initiation of force, no matter who does, and that means governments or people or corporations. So
I gotcha. And actually, your comment on the elevator pitch actually just gave me an idea. So this might help some people meet you where they're at. So pretend for a moment that we'll go back to the 2024 election. Pretend I voted for Biden in 2020 and I'm completely dissatisfied. I don't like what he's done with the economy. I'm dissatisfied with my vote. What would your pitch to somebody like that be to maybe try Libertarian in 2024? And then we can do the same for Trump in 2024.
Yeah, this is where I've always been bad at like the short answers because...
Oh, go long. Feel free.
Here's the problem. Most people have no idea how money works. So, if you're talking about like what we're typically told Well, you want to reduce interest rates, so that makes it easier for us to get money and all of that. But they don't, nobody puts together what that really means in terms of fiat currency in the Federal Reserve System. So it'd be nice if we had free market banks, and banks themselves would adjust their interest rates to suit the market. So in other words, if we just had banks as just individual entities that were investing money and doing things with money that you put in, and then it was above board, and so you would know that I volunteer to have you invest my money for me, and that's where, it's going to make it easier for you to give me, some interest on my deposits and so on. That'd be great. And I think that's how most people think banks work. But that isn't the way banks work. The way banks actually work is that there is, the Bank of International Settlements is sort of where a lot of this starts, even before we get to the Fed. And it's basically a system by which you have somebody who just is a money printer. It's counterfeiting. They just spit out a bunch of money that isn't backed by anything. And the way the Fed does it is a little complicated, and I have it written down in my book, in more detail how it actually works. Because if they just printed out the money and handed it to you, I think people would be onto the idea that, hey, this is just monopoly money; it isn't worth anything. But they do things like, they issue certificates, and they're giving this money to, to banks first, and the people that are, and there are all kinds of, there are terms that go along with this that I'm not going to get into too much, but basically the bottom line is that people that get this freshly issued money first, they're the ones who get the pre-inflation dollars, and they can buy real stuff with money that is worth, what it was yesterday. But as these dollars go into circulation, because there are more and more of them, they're worth less and less. It's just like anything else. If everybody had diamonds coming out of the ground, diamonds wouldn't be worth anything. And in fact, they'd become a nuisance at some point. Same thing with gold. Gold has industrial uses and all of that. But after that, if it's totally abundant, it isn't worth anything. We're just talking about paper, and they're just spewing out paper all over the place. Each time they issue more and more dollars, each one is worth less and less. So I guess to simplify this, the way banks work today is the Fed, they print out money like crazy. Every time they do this, each dollar is worth less and less. Banks are among the people who get this money first, banks and large corporations that, that can buy these issues of bonds from the Federal Reserve. So the treasuries come out, and those things are basically the monetary units that are used to theoretically back up these dollars that aren't made of anything. The treasury certificates aren't made of anything either. So it's basically a fraud. But they can buy real stuff with these fake dollars. They loan you these fake dollars, and if you don't pay them back, then they can take your real stuff. So, this is how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it's been happening like this forever. And one of the fallacies that happens, I gotta say, within the Libertarian Party as well, is a lot of people will say that, well, this is free market, it's not government, so it's okay. But corporations are government entities. They're chartered by government. They're regulated by government. And so this is one of those cases where the Fed, even though a lot of libertarians will say, well, it's, it's private bankers. No, it's not really. It's quasi-political, quasi-corporate, and it's entirely a government unto itself.
Well, yeah, and the chair of the Federal Reserve is appointed by the president.
From people that are selected. I mean, he's given a slate of options by, the people who are running the Fed. And the people running the Fed are really more or less like the BIS, deep state, the people, you can say puppet masters, there are all kinds of terms for all of this stuff. But there are a handful of really powerful people that really run most of the world. And it's not just the United States, it really is, kind of the whole world. And some of this goes back to the technocracy movement of the 1930s. And it's that even is kind of an outgrowth of the Fabian socialists of the 1800s. So there's a big banking thing that a lot of people will talk about, the Rothschilds, and even going back further than that, even going back to the Phrygians, at the time of Babylon. So there's an ancient tendency for any government form, to become a plutocracy run by rich people. And now the tendency is to make it, more technocratic. So it's going to be rich people who are also technocrats. So I made that really complicated, didn't I?
Well, no, you're good, but I guess to kind of shift it, because I love it, but to shift it back to sort of the prompt is, so okay, not that I want to put words in your mouth, but if I'm understanding you right, would you say that maybe the sort of the belief that a lot of people who tend to, not all, but people who tend to vote Democrat is that they believe that that party has the economic interest of the common person as paramount, but the system in and of itself is counter to that based on what you just laid out?
Yes, but I would say that in this particular instance, it's common to both Democrats and Republicans.
This is true, yeah.
So the Democrats believe that, in fact, maybe I can make this a little bit cruder. Democrats tend to think that, corporations bought out our government. And Republicans tend to think that, our government sold out to, corporations. And I mean, the stupid thing is, at the bottom of this, it's the same problem. The power is always for sale, and there are always people willing to buy it. And it's voters' fault that we let this happen. So, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you believe that corporations are the evil ones, or whether you think, that the government itself is the evil ones, they're both right. And that, when you've got a free market business that's not under incorporated rules, not under government regulations, that's an entirely different kind of market principle, an entirely different kind of trade than when you've got a corporation that's been, chartered by the United States of America through some state organization, through a state usually, but increasingly with federalized rules. Then you essentially have a hand-in-glove relationship between corporatism and socialism, which is how Mussolini really defined fascism. So what we have these days, both in China and the United States, is kind of a hand-in-glove relationship between the people who are running large corporations, not mom and pop organizations, not a local restaurant or something, but the very large organizations that are big enough to buy a congressman. Those things are essentially fascist organs within a cabal of people that are running both the government and the corporate network. Democrats and Republicans, but they all seem to get that wrong. And even if they think the government is corrupt, and who doesn't know that our government is corrupt, they're voting for the mechanism of corruption whenever they vote for, frankly, the two-party system is it's a puppet show.
So to your mind, it really is a uniparty.
It really
at
is.
Its core. Yeah.
It really is. And having run as a Republican and having known a lot of Democrats and having been involved in this for a long time, meeting a lot of the people involved, and including a lot of the big money people, I've got to say that it's not just, kind of well known. It's getting super obvious under Trump. Basically, what I think the issue is that everybody knows our government's corrupt, but they don't understand their power. They don't understand what voting is all about. They don't know that it's really the power of peaceful revolution and that we need a revolution. And the nature of that revolution should be against that whole puppet show. And, it's not like there aren't good Democrats and Republicans. There are, like Thomas Massie, I think is fantastic. He's doing a great job. But if we were to fire all of them and start over again, I think we would be much better off, because one of the biggest problems isn't just the puppets themselves. It's the enabling mechanism of the fundraisers and the permanent permanent staffers, the partisan and nonpartisan staffers. You've got all of the bundlers, and you've got, lobbyists, and that whole mechanism needs to be fired. And that would be hard to do just by, if you're just nibbling at the branches of the two-party system, you're not going to get at the mechanism that's really running the whole show.
So what would the libertarian prescription for that be? Like what, and I understand that's a big question, but yeah, vote libertarian. But I mean, I guess a better way to phrase that question, because a lot of people think about, and it's wrong to do this, but most people think about politics in terms of the president.
Yeah.
So what would a libertarian in the White, like if a libertarian won in 2028, just out the gate, what are some things you could expect to see if that were to happen? I know it's unlikely, but
well, here, this is where this is going to sound like I should put on an aluminum tinfoil hat before I say this. But given the nature of what I think a lot of us even suspect the deep state actually is and how much power they actually wield, whether it's, through Israel or, even beyond that kind of power structure. If voters were to think that they're doing some kind of revolutionary thing by hiring one person, just a president, anybody can be threatened, whether it's, honeypots and blackmail, or whether it's with money, or whether it's threats against your children. There isn't any one person who is going to fix everything in that kind of regard. And so one of the things, I don't think it's happening, but one of the things that's kind of like a cherished hope is that maybe Trump really is doing some kind of 5D chess sort of thing, and that he's acting like a fool, and he's not nearly as much of a clown as he's acting, and that good things are really happening behind the scenes. And people, who are Trump idolaters keep trying to tell me that that's what's going on, and you just wait, good stuff is really happening. I want that to happen. And I'd be the first to just praise whatever he did in that regard. If I were to find out that suddenly, the Federal Reserve is gone, my tendency would be to say, well, what are you replacing it with? But if there was a genuine attempt to get rid of the mechanisms of corruption that we've got right now, I'd be all in for, Trump. I don't think that's the case. And I think that it's easy to see, the people that have been buying him off since the 1970s still hold his strings. And I think that if a libertarian were to get elected without a libertarian Congress behind him, without a sort of libertarian, and other third parties, if the Greens won also, if you had third parties in general win, what that would tell everybody in charge would be that, voters have had it, that a revolution would have already started. Because, frankly, all revolutions start in the mind. The means of the revolution is almost, one is violent, one is peaceful, whatever the case might be, but the revolution starts here. And voting, if nothing else, is a gauge of where our heads and hearts are at. So if we were to actually vote for third parties across the board and really put the hurt on the two-party system, that would be effective. Now, if it's just the president, I'm of two minds on this. Right now, under Trump, the president has stupid power, totally unconstitutional, way too much power. And Congress has been letting him get away with all kinds of stuff. It's totally unconstitutional. So, this has been the case for a while. It's not just under Trump. We haven't had an actual declaration of war since World War II. And, and even in terms of, like the National Guard, we're supposed to have state militias under the governors as commander in chief. And like in an Indiana Constitution, there isn't an age limit set for being in the militia. So even me, banging on the door of 70 years old, I would be in the militia. And if you think about what that constitutional design would actually mean, would be that if, say, for instance, I'm in the militia, and say, for instance, I'm retired now, but if I wasn't retired, if I was expected to quit my job, or leave my job to go in somebody else's country and kill people that I've never met, I would have a tendency not to vote for anybody who would do that to me. So there was a multifaceted design built into the Constitution for militias, where we were supposed to take personal responsibility for violence. That's a very, libertarian thing. And if you're looking to see what it would take for us to just change the military-industrial complex and scientific technological elite that Eisenhower warned us against, it would be that kind of fundamental change to our the structure of our government and our military. And the only way that would happen would be as if we turned over Congress, as well as the president, as well as the courts. And that's going to take, I think that's going to be more than just an election. That's going to be like a civil rights marches and elections. It would be, to make this peaceful, it would have to be in the streets protests that are not happening. It would have to be election, turnovers that are not happening. And, I guess one of the things that I like seeing right now is that under Trump, people are seeing that things are wacky. I think a lot of people see the economy as not the way he described it last night. And that if people are really hurting, they might end up in the street. They might end up, actually wanting to get off their duffs and do something different.
I did drive by a protest yesterday. It seemed to be just an anti-Trump and a small one, but it seemed to pop up out of nowhere. So maybe there's a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, there's always, but that's just it. If it's just anti-Trump, that's no good.
Yeah,
It's got to
exactly.
be.
That was my sentiment.
Yeah,
It's because my friend and I do another podcast, and we don't talk politics all the time, but we talk politics a lot, and we've gone through 2 elections thus far. And to me, it seems like I've been pretty consistent, and I'm generally frustrated with whoever's in party, but that's the libertarian in me. But it's because I try not to be. I will admit, in 2024, I did vote for Donald Trump. Regret it. I really regret it. Even in the voting booth, I was like, Donald or Chase, Donald or Chase. And I really wish I voted Chase, and I apologize. I apologize to the
that's
United
okay.
States.
I confess I left that slot blank. So
Oh, well, yeah. So anyway, the point I'm making is that typically when we're having political discussions, I often point out problems that are part of the system rather than the candidate, because I'd say this now, everybody who's complaining about what Trump is doing now, his excessive, power as the president, that's not new to Trump. Biden had it, Obama had it, Bush had it, both of them. Because like you said, this goes back to, you can point to specific events. This really goes, in my understanding, really kind of goes back to the Second World War. There was an expansion of powers, and through history, there's an expansion of powers, and then you go into the Cold War and all those non-declared military actions, and then you get to 9/11, and that was just.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the Alien Sedition Acts were totally unconstitutional, and you could see, ever since the ink was wet on the constitutions, people were fighting against it. I mean, the idea that the Constitution is a leash on people who don't want to wear a leash, and they're the ones who we let make the rules. So it was inevitable that things were going to start going haywire. And so, even if you're looking at like the 18th Amendment, where, they properly, stupidly, but properly, banned the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors. Now, they did not, in that amendment, ban the consumption or purchase of intoxicating liquors. But, what's weird about that is that with the 21st Amendment, they wiped out the 18th Amendment, they replaced it with nothing. And now we regulate the consumption and purchase and manufacture and sale and distribution of everything. And there has never been a constitutional amendment for that. So that's just one example where it doesn't take, like a specific event to trigger like an onslaught of, new regulations. But that certainly does help when there's anything like, a war is a case where every time there's a war, our founders talked about that, the war is like you open up the coffers and you give the executive too much power. That's always been the case. But everything else, is another means of reducing freedom. So if there's a, I don't know, like but cause the FDA to be formed, you say that these people are making ketchup with bad ingredients in it or something. And so you go to a congressman and you say, I need you to ban the following things. It doesn't take very much. And that's happening all the time. That's what lobbyists are paid to do. They're paid to go to Washington, D.C. and take away some of our liberties, pervert things a little bit more, change rules, maybe give, tremendous amount of power to a foreign government. All of this stuff actually happens over time. And, given what we have learned from our government, like here in Indiana, where we had Lyle Station, Indiana, where they did radiation experiments on school kids. We've had things that should have taught us a lesson a long time ago, that our government does not have our best interests in mind, and we should stop trusting it with everything, including our kids' minds.
Yeah, well, I did say when they rolled, and this was under Trump, by the way, but I said it repeatedly into the Biden administration. When they did the quick rollout of the COVID vaccines, I said, and we're going to trust the people who, among other things, purposefully gave people syphilis and lied to them about it. And it wasn't that long ago.
No, and it wasn't that long ago that our government actually bombed 2 different black cities in 2 different states. And you think about how many things that people have been complaining about for generations. We've found ways to partition it off. So we'd say, well, okay, that was black people, that was some time ago, or that was the Indians, that was some time ago, or that was just for alcohol, that was some time ago. but the problem is the powers never went away. And so with, like, for instance, with, with the 18th Amendment, our government was never given the power to poison alcohol supplies that killed 10,000 people or more. But they took that power. And so we give them a little power that, in writing that isn't constitutional, but okay, they wrote it down, but then they take a lot more. And I think one of the things that was kind of shocking to me is you remember the Boston Marathon bombing, where out of nowhere, you don't see these people all the time. You see black clad stormtroopers and big black military vehicles appear from nowhere. And they're in the streets everywhere all at once. Where do they come from? They were always there. And that's, I guess, that they're always there thing really kind of struck me when, this was decades ago now, when it was kind of a joke that I can't remember, you're like in north of Indianapolis somewhere.
Yeah, north side of Indy.
Yeah, somewhere up there, they had there was kind of a big deal made where they a local police department had an amphibious armored personnel carrier, and this was years ago, and it was a joke. But the fact is, they have an amphibious armored personnel carrier.
You want to know what's funny about that? I've seen it. I drove by it. I know it was Fisher's PD.
Okay, yeah, and that's where this is the kind of stuff that, at first it's a little bit of a joke, but then you find out that the USDA had a requisition for, millions of rounds of ammos for the automatic weapons that they had, and the Department of Education had machine guns, and wait a second, wait.
You're going to learn Common Core, and you're going to like it.
Andy, you have not turned in your assignments 2 weeks in a row.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. People don't see it until it's too late. And then, then there's a crisis and they're too, and everybody obviously, but a lot of people are too scared to go, hey, wait a minute. I don't remember asking for that.
Yeah. But that's you did okay all of this with your vote. And that's where I think people just don't realize that. And so it's one thing to say, oh, if you don't vote, you have no say. But if you're voting without paying attention, and if you're just punching buttons, I would rather you don't vote. You really shouldn't be. You're running the country, and we expect people to, to take a driver's test, and we expect people to know what they're doing if you're going to, I don't know, be an electrician or something like that. There are things that you should know before you go and do it. And with voting, you really are determining the course of the world to a large degree, given how influential the United States has become. And we are very irresponsible with our votes.
We choose to go to the moon and participate and do the other things. Weird.
Someone said that frickin' Panera's Pepsi's taste funny.
Better.
No, I mean...
What?
It's like even American immigration policy affects countries all over the world.
Yeah. Well, and of course, our wars affect immigration policy.
More so, yeah.
We blow up a country and people want to get out of there, and they come to the place that blew them up, and it's not not a very good scenario.
No, not at all. So, I mean, I guess some people are probably watching this and now they're scratching their heads. Well, what do I do? Because this sounds real bad.
Well, it just so happens, I have written down in my book, Relighting the Torch. The last chapter actually has a bunch of suggestions. Now, legislatively, I have some suggestions. I have some, the whole thing is about the Constitution, how this was all supposed to work if I actually did the Constitution. But bottom line is, we get what we choose, and we have to just want to choose something better. Now, I suggest the constitutions because it's already ours, it's already law. And, I've got lots of things in this book to talk about how to at least get our politicians to recognize that either we're doing the Constitution or we're not. We can have nullification, we can have a resolution at least saying we're going to do the Constitution or not. And then we'd find out who votes against it. There are all kinds of things like that we can do, but we have to vote for that. So really, anything I would suggest would still have the same prerequisite that we have to get our heads right. We have to understand that we've got a lot of power. We outnumber the bad guys millions to one, of course. And we can take to the streets, we can protest, we can show up at meetings, we can make demands. We're not doing that. We're not doing any of that. And I keep hearing people saying things like, well, if voting actually worked, they wouldn't let us do it. We've not even tried it. And if you ask people, your neighbors, just take a mile radius, go door to door, ask them how they vote. You will see the problem. You will see very quickly why it is that we've got what we've got. And people will angrily defend their bad choices up to the point where you ask them, all right, what's the name of the guy that's actually representing you in the U.S. House of Representatives? They might not know. And then you
ask. Say a lot of people, I actually don't know that because I moved since I last election. I'd have to look it up.
So you're the problem. So now,
yeah, it's my fault.
Okay, Jake Boger is actually the problem. The United States of America. No, it goes further than that.
Well, but I mean, you have a point, and yeah, shame on shame on me. I need to practice what I preach. So yes, I certainly before I vote, I will know that. But yeah, I should know. Should know, even because I live here.
Yeah, well, it's I'm picking on one thing, of course, and I'm really
not
going to be telling everybody that you're the one to blame for all of our problems.
I mean, that would be very, very libertarian meme of you.
We do go after our own, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I joke with love, and I always say that the Libertarian Party's biggest problem is other libertarians.
But you know what? Policing your own party is not really such a bad idea.
No, it's not. But I mean, I say this in jest, but I mean, it's kind of true. Like, libertarians can't even agree on road policy.
Well, but one of the things that I have to say, too, about the fancy pants parties is that their internal squabbles are just as bad, if not worse. It's just they know how to shut their mouths on, outside their doors. And so
this is fair. And as somebody who likes governmental gridlock, I kind of like the fact that, hey, if we just argue about roads for 4 years, I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah. And like I told you at the beginning of this, my biggest problem when I ran as a Republican was other Republicans. So, the people who were preventing the good candidates from winning, like here in Indiana, look at what's happened over the last several election cycles where Republicans changed the rules to try to keep out good Republicans. So they say, well, you didn't vote in the previous, in the previous primary for Republican, or now, no, you have to vote in the previous 2 primaries, or maybe we're just going to change the rules and we're not going to seat any of Ron Paul's delegates, or, those things kind of happen, and that's ugly. But the only way to fix that would be for good Republicans to really rise up and get active, and they don't do that any more than libertarians do. So, I mean, libertarians, I've been doing this for 30 years now. So I hope I'm not, I hope people are not going to be taking this too hard. But libertarians tend to be, and I'm going to couch this with love. Love, you see, love, hearts. Lots of people want to write speeches. They want to, kind of be in the vanguard of ideas and stuff, but we don't have very many soldiers. We don't have very many people who are willing to just go out and do, what Republicans have in spades. Now, I've never run as a Democrat, but I see that they have the same thing. Now, they pay people to protest and they pay people to do all kinds of stuff because they have a lot of rich donors and so on. But Republicans, I have seen, have a lot of non-ideological people who are just troops. And that is a very useful thing. We libertarians don't have that. But if the Republicans want to improve their party, if the libertarians want to improve their party, I mean, there are 2 things have to happen. They have to first get an idea what it is to be a libertarian or a Republican, fix that in their mind, and then fight for it. And we're really not so good at doing that. And that's where My biggest beef with the Libertarian Party, frankly, has always been our priorities are the ones that are most offensive to most people. So the first thing people, ask me, if they say you're running as a libertarian, oh, so you want open borders? Well, no, that's not. I'm not that kind of libertarian. Or no, you want gay sex and everybody to do drugs? No, that's not. And that's because we have been reinforcing a stereotype of sex, drugs, and open borders for way too long, and that has just one of the reasons I had a problem with Chase is, I liked him personally, and he was right on a lot of issues, but he was dead wrong and tone deaf on a lot of other issues. And the ones that people knew him for were the ones that he was wrong about. And you just can't do that because, you have something like that at the top of the party, or like, I actually like Johnson a lot. I talked to him a lot. I argued with him many times about his bake the cake thing. But that bake the cake thing was very unlibertarian. And you can't really get away with that.
Can you remind me what that was? Because I don't know that I'm familiar with the bake the cake.
You remember the baker who did not want
yeah.
Colorado? Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, there's that thing about Aleppo. Like what's Aleppo?
I watched that happen live, and I'm like, oh, that's it. That did it.
It's frustrating is his answer after that was fine. He recovered.
I agree, but I just knew in that moment, and I sympathize. It happens to me on podcasts all the time. I forget things that I know verbatim. I don't know what it is because I'm not nervous. I've been doing this for years, and it's just like, what am I? So I don't fault him for that. I defended him on that. I'm like, listen, you get in front of a news anchor, and and all of you only know what Aleppo is for the past 2 weeks because they've been talking about it on the news. It's also the reason everybody pronounces Kiev now because they started doing it on the news. And I'm like, we've been pronouncing it Kiev for as long as I've been alive or longer, and all of a sudden CNN starts saying Kiev, and now everybody's like, it's Kiev, not Kiev. And I'm like, I understand it's Kiev in Ukrainian, but you don't speak Ukrainian.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you do, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I said do it fluently. No, the other part to that is its context is everything. If somebody says, "What's Aleppo?" and you hear, "What is Aleppo?" Well, I don't know what Aleppo is. I did 2 Aleppos, 3 Aleppos. There's context is everything. So I've had a microphone thrust in my face many times, and you can freeze up, not just because it's a nerve-wracking thing, but because the context is missing. And you just don't realize we're talking geography now. And just a minute ago, we were talking about, something else. So, that can happen. And so I don't want to, ding him on that. It's really the things like the bake the cake thing that he reinforced many times and said, well, there are laws on the books about this. So, you're held, but those are unconstitutional laws.
So you're referring to the fact that he said that the baker should have baked the cake in that instance.
Should have baked that. You don't really have freedom of association. You don't really have freedom to run your business the way you want. And that is very unlibertarian. And so that kind of thing, I have a harder time excusing, but I still voted for him. I mean, it's not like he was still by far the best candidate.
Well, case in point, I didn't know what you were talking about when you said bake the cake, but I never heard it that way. But I know what happened, but I never heard it referred to as the bake the cake thing. So I pulled a Gary Johnson. Sorry. But you said context is everything, and you're 100% right.
And that's where if we as we the people want to fix this, we have to do something really, really simple, but really, really hard. We have to admit we've been making bad choices, and we have to make different choices. And what does that mean in action? What it means. I mean, easy thing is voting, but is that all we're going to do? I mean, at this point, that might not be enough. We demonstrated fraud in 2004. A lot of people think that the 2020 election was fraudulent. I don't doubt it. I mean, I know that there would have been. I mean, there's always fraud in every election. Whether it was significant in Trump's election, sure seems likely that Biden got a heck of a lot more votes than he should have. So
I did see one, and I can't say the numbers were correct because I know actually I take that back. I did verify them. Somebody had shared an infographic with me, and I verified the numbers that they had the number of votes that Biden got in. I think it was Raleigh, North Carolina. exceeded the population of the city of Raleigh. And I'm just like, I mean,
That seems suspicious.
That seems like something doesn't add up.
Yeah, and that's you can go in the wrong direction with that too, though, because a lot of people will look at that and they'll say, oh, well, it's too late to do anything about it. We're sunk. They can, who's counting the votes, and there just aren't enough of it. But that's where we screw up. There are enough of us, and what we have to get over is the fact that, well, in fact, let me make this even more pointed towards, my people who get it. The people who know the way things are, the people who look, we get our wise eyes on, we look at, we fold our hands, we say, well, the way things are, we get it, but we don't act like we get it. And one of the ways we act like, we're not acting like we know what we're doing is when we say we have to teach other people, we have to get other people to do this when we're not doing what we want them to do. There are enough of us who now understand enough of the truth about the influence of Israel or our war machine or, the unconstitutional, corrupt nature of our government, whatever it is. There are enough of us that know all of this that we should have enough common ground that we vote like we know what we say we know. And we're not doing that right now. So we don't vote like we're aware that things are wrong. So when we hold our nose and vote for the status quo and say, well, you can't vote for who you want, because you can't let these other guys win. And we're thinking short term. We don't understand that this election is what determines the next election. We're not thinking about how really the key thing here is corruption. And if you're voting for anybody who's a part of that corruption, you're just adding to it. So if we wanted to be serious about changing things, we have to understand that we've been using our votes badly. And if it turns out that our voting doesn't work, we have to understand what plan B is. And are we ready to do that? And are we serious enough to take that up? That's tough. I mean, how many of us actually would actually organize a protest and do it? I've done it. I've organized lots of protests. I organized one in 2007 that made national news, and done it a few times since then. It's not super easy, but it's also not that hard, and it's actually kind of fun. And if we were to start getting serious about what it is that we think needs doing, we would be protesting. We would be showing up at the State House. We would be, at least putting some kind of pressure on our politicians to do what they say they were going to do anyway.
Yeah, and I think another thing, a lot of people, like you said, most people vote short term, but I can speak for myself. Obviously, like when I voted for Gary Johnson, I wanted him to win in 2016, but I had no illusions. What I was really voting for was to get the 15% threshold to be on the ballot in all 50 states the next year, which they did. And then Joe Jorgensen just didn't have a lot of
chutzpah.
No, not really. I remember debating, and it wasn't that I necessarily disliked her. I just didn't know a lot about her. I still voted for her, but I was not wrestling, but I was debating about it because I'm like, I just don't get the libertarian warm and fuzzy from her. But again, it's, I want that 15, which a lot of people don't know. The reason third parties aren't on most of your ballots is because there's, and I think they did this as a response to Ross Perot, or maybe that's just the debates. I don't know when they actually instituted that 15% rule of the popular vote to get on the ballot in all 50 states.
Well, I mean, it really was Perot that changed a lot of things. Like Indiana doubled its signature requirements for statewide ballot access. I mean, all kinds of that really caused ripples all across the country. But that should have told us something too. What that should have told us is, not that, oh, it's too late. What that should have told us is, wow, that was close. Look at, he scared them. And we should have taken that much more seriously and pressed the attack, and we did. And getting back to Joe Jorgensen, she was a good example of one of my problems with libertarians in general. I liked her a lot in a lot of ways, and if you look at what her actual stands were, her questionnaire answers, they were great. But when she got in front of a camera, she would too often do something like, say, oh well, the BLM riots or the Antifa, she took the wrong side on those things, and she chose to go with like identity politics, which is a very common theme with libertarians. We tend to go for the 3% and turn off the 97%. And that's just not a good policy. And she was just too quick to do that. And she had this kind of thing where she's trying to, I don't know if it was because she's a psychologist and she was trying to project female warmth or something.
I did get that vibe. Now that I think about it, I did somewhat get that vibe from her. So
yeah, and she did not come off as a president. And that's just you just, if you're going to run for president, you have to dress like a president. You have to act like a president because you're applying to be president. And that is a key problem with libertarians in general, where, Johnson would wear tennis shoes and show up to an interview high. You just can't do that. And the thing with Aleppo, a lot of people were probably thinking, well, maybe he didn't know that because he was high. And once you have that kind of perception, you're going to be fighting it forever. And I've been fighting that forever as a libertarian who isn't into drugs, and I'm not into the sex and open borders stuff. I'm probably much more conservative. I'm much more like a Ron Paul libertarian. It's really difficult to have to fight the stereotype of libertarians. And I nothing against Chase Oliver, but he did look like, when looks matter, and he
was young too, and it came off. It
wasn't just young. Yeah. It wasn't just young. I mean, it's just that I hate to be like this, but looks do matter, and he did look like somebody who came out of his mother's basement out of a 2-week hangover or something, and the only reason I'd say that is because we have a stereotype of exactly that, and that we tend to be thought of as people who live in our mother's basement, and we really need to step up more than that. And so that's why I think like somebody like Harry Brown, you're probably too young to remember.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not ringing a bell.
Look up Harry Brown. He was a fantastic candidate. And, he was our presidential candidate. And I got to introduce him in Indianapolis and got to talk to him a few times. What a wonderful candidate. He was tall. He looked presidential. Man, I wish we could have had that. And in fact, I wish we could have had Dave Smith as, libertarian.
I said when Johnson ran with Bill Weld, I was like, can we, like, don't get me wrong, I like him, but can we flip this? Because I thought Bill Weld was...
he looked presidential, but no, Bill Weld was not. He was, especially when he all but endorsed Hillary Clinton.
See, I didn't...
Yeah, if you look into...
I guess I didn't hear that. Yeah, well, I know he was Was he a former Democrat or was he a Republican? I feel like
he was a Republican. He was a Republican, but he's I'm not going to get into all it. We've had a lot of clinkers.
I'm not trying to like. I'm not playing a shooting gallery here, but I guess because I do
I'm
want
a libertarian.
It's like right up my alley. I do want to get into your book, but I guess just because I really went into this wanting people who are watching or listening to it to at least get a sense of hope that this might actually be possible to change. Maybe, and like you said, maybe you're not even a libertarian, but I guess understanding that this is going to be a process and it's going to be slow and it's going to be elections.
No. Slow always loses. Always. Slow is how you get decay. I mean, if you're expecting anything good to happen slowly, then that means you're not trying and you're not looking at history correctly. There are things that build over time. So like the civil rights movement, was building, and then all of a sudden, boom. You had, even like the abolition abolition of alcohol. That took there's a number of years, and then boom, we got the law. And it really came with women's right to vote. So when women got the right to vote, that's when we got, teetotalers started voting. So
yeah, because the temperance movement, kind of really started getting steam in like the 1880s, right?
Oh, actually, yes, steam, but it started right after the Civil War.
Yeah, it started. Yeah.
But the bottom line is when things when you expect something to change or overturn in a government. So, for instance, when things have gotten so bad, you feel like we need to take up arms against it. That's got to happen fast. You got to have a plan. It's got to, and it often fails badly. So that people often talk about the American Revolution versus the French Revolution. One you get freedom, the other one you get guillotines. So it's you have to think. Listen, this generation is angry. This generation wants to do something about it. This generation has to get it done, and that's the way it's got to be. It's not going to. I hear a lot of people blaming boomers, but they're not taking under consideration that every generation has had its protesters who were young, and so the civil rights movement, all that stuff those were boomers, and young people now have more information and more technology at their disposal than anybody ever. They're the first generation to start hearing some of the truth that very few of us have been crying about for a long time. So, this is the generation that has less excuse than anybody else. So really, the people who are young right now are the ones who should be, like my generation did a long time ago, taken to the streets and protesting and making things happen. And this the people who are young now have all the information they need to organize. They have the technology to organize like we never had before. They have technology to communicate like we never had before. So there is no excuse now for people not to get into the streets and actually put pressure on not just politicians, but the media. The media is very important. And I'm not talking about just, the usual TV, newspaper, stuff like that. What you're doing right now, podcasters, alternative media of every stripe, we need to be influencing those people. As boomers too, but I guess whenever I see boomer, that term boomer and boomers are, man, go blame me for whatever you want. I blame Wilson's generation. I blame FDR's generation. I blame Adams and the alien sedition. I blame Adam and Eve. But the fact, what is your generation going to do now? We're giving you this. My generation is handing this package of information and technology and, even history of protests off to you guys. And it's always a few people that determine the course of history. Look what the founders did. That was like 22% really wanted to leave, to throw off their government of England and start a new country. Everybody else wanted to be English. So, the fact is, it doesn't take a majority. And so when they give you these polls that say something like 80 some odd percent of boomers still believe, Israel is, we should be fighting for Israel and all that kind of stuff. Come on, get over it. That has nothing to do with anything. That's just another kind of racism. It's another kind of tribalism, and we don't need that right now. What we need is action. And so, okay, blame me if you want. Just get it out of your system. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to have a protest? Are you going to run for office? Are you going to do something different? Are you going to do something my generation was not able to do or didn't do? Are you going to do it or not? So, blame whoever you want, but get that out of your system and start doing something.
Hey, so let's talk about that amazing idea you've got. The one that's always in the back of your mind. Well, it absolutely deserves to be heard. Today, we're going to look at a network that's built to do just that, to amplify your voice and make that idea a reality.
Seriously, think about it for a second. What's that one thing you're passionate about? That one story that only you can tell? We all have that topic we could just talk about for hours on end, right? But there's a catch. That's the big question, isn't it? It's the hurdle that stops so many fantastic ideas cold. The how of it all can feel, super overwhelming and honestly a little intimidating. So what if you had a partner to help you get over that hurdle? Well, let's meet Arete Media. It's a podcast network, and its whole mission is to help creators like you launch and grow their shows. Think of them as your partner in crime, helping with the tough stuff so you can just focus on being creative. Now, anyone can say they'll help, right? But the real proof is in the community they've built. And you've got shows that dive into pop culture and revisit those childhood scares, like the Goosebumps crew, sitting right alongside shows that give you these sharp business insights, like Startup Cores with Salt, Arizona. And the list just keeps going. There are shows about self-improvement, deep dives into the magic of Broadway, even really academic explorations of classical music. It just goes to show you there's a space for every single kind of creator. It shows that no topic is too niche or, frankly, too bold. And this isn't just some static library of old shows. It's a living, breathing community. It's not just about making content, it's about celebrating it. For instance, they even host the annual Arete Awards to recognize the best shows on the network. And just to show you how active it is, here's the latest episode from the Average Intelligence podcast, which just dropped. Seeing this really drives home that the network is constantly platforming its creators and their brand new work. So after seeing all of this, the question is pretty simple. You've got the idea. You've seen that there's a community waiting. Are you ready to take that step and finally share your voice? And here's how you do it. The whole path from idea to launch is laid out for you right there. It's not just about podcasts. It's about the stories and the knowledge and the passion inside all of us. So, what's yours?
Yeah, I was talking more in terms of voting, but I mean, yeah, you're right because we see it.
I mean, like I was saying before, voting is a gauge. It's just a gauge. But, you also you've heard this, I'm sure, where people say, well, we need to take up our arms at this point. No, it's only, we've tried the ballot box. No, we haven't. But now it's time for the ammo box. No, it's not. You're not going to shoot somebody for what you won't even vote for. If you're not going to just do the easy part, you're sure not going to do the hard thing. And say, for instance, you think that voting's not going to work. Well, are you protesting? Are you doing plan B? We're not ready for plan C yet. Plan B is taken to the streets. That's, getting out there and actually getting into people's faces and doing something. And you see paid protesters doing it. Why don't we do it for free, for our freedom? It seems like something that should be a no-brainer, but we're not really doing it.
Well, getting into your book, Relighting the Torch, what was the genesis of this book? What is it really? You've touched on elements of it, but I want to give you the floor for a minute to kind of tell people why they should get your book and pick it up and read it.
Well, first of all, it has a couple of things in it that I had out there on the internet for many, many years that have been used in homeschooling classes, and people told me they were very valuable. And so I decided to take it off the internet for free and put it in a book, and maybe you can pay me for it now. But it's an annotated Constitution and Declaration of Independence. So I've got the whole Constitution. I'll actually get this in the correct order. I've got the whole Declaration of Independence with my annotations in it. It's got the whole Constitution with my annotations in it. And the reason I'm pointing this out is the annotations, I've been told, and I believe, are useful for pointing out stuff that you would just gloss over and miss otherwise, or give a little bit of context that makes it understandable in today's unconstitutional world. So I point things out where we need to get back on track. So that's part of the book. That's kind of like the middle chunk of the book. First part of the book, basically I'm talking about how, where we are today, then how is this actually supposed to work? How regulations are actually supposed to work versus how they actually do. I've got a whole chapter on corporations now that I didn't have in my first edition, because I think it's important for people to understand our abstractions. And I do have I say a lot about the abstraction of government, the abstraction of corporations, because we tend to think of governments and corporations as a thing in themselves, and that government can do something. And governments can't do anything. They're abstractions. People do things. Same thing with corporations. When we gave corporations human rights in 1886, that was a stupid thing to do. And the fact that we give Palantir and BlackRock and all these large corporations human rights, we're giving them powers that we don't have. And they've got tremendous amounts of resources of money that politicians give them. And all of this stuff, if we were to understand it, then we would have sort of the tools to oppose it. And so we first have to get the tools on our head to understand and oppose. So what I'm trying to do with the book is describe some things, even like socialism versus fascism versus where we are today, which is basically fascism. And then I go into the two-party system. So I do have, like a whole chapter on the two-party system. how it was supposed to work. It was never supposed to work. We're never supposed to have parties. And then a lot about money and the Fed. So, and that's before I get to the Declaration of Independence and Constitution. So basically, where we're at, how it was supposed to work, where we went wrong. Then I've got the rules. I've got sort of the philosophical framework of the Declaration of Independence. The legal framework of our country is the Constitution. It's the authority for all of our politicians. If, basically, like the 9th and 10th Amendments clarify, Ninth Amendment says basically we have all rights that are not specifically taken away. But the 10th Amendment says that the government has no rights that are not specifically granted to it. So if it ain't in the Constitution, it's forbidden. And that's where a lot of people, get things wrong with the Constitution. They get the idea that, well, the Constitution doesn't say that our government can't do that. Well, yes, it does. Because if it doesn't say that it can, then it is saying with the 10th Amendment that it can't. So there are things like that in the annotations. And then the basically after that part of it, it's basically the last chapter is how we fix it. So I've got, a whole bunch of, proposals. But the first things I do talk about is that we really have to change ourselves first, and that nothing gets better until we do. I mean, that the brutal fact is that our government is kind of the avatar of our sins. It's the amplifier of all that's worst in us. I mean, if we were good, if we were like angels, we wouldn't have government at all. But because we have a tendency to want to govern other people, and because we don't really want to govern ourselves, we have built this monster, and this monster is now destroying us. And if we, don't get this thing under control, we're cooked as a nation, which would be nothing new. I mean, all nations fail sooner or later. And, maybe this is the generation to finally pack it in. But, I don't like that idea. So I've proposed ways to fix it. And kind of my conclusion at the end, of all of this is that, we really need to understand that we have the power and we have the accountability. So we have to live with the results of our actions and who we are. And if we decide we want to be a better nation, we have to figure out what that looks like and then become it.
Which leads into sort of my next, I was going to phrase this as and I know you're not, at least I don't think you're running for president, but a horning and I don't think you're that big of a masochist.
No, my wife wouldn't let me if nothing else.
Figure. But if Andrew Horning were to run for president, what would candidate Horning's campaign strategy be?
Well, strategy is a political thing, really, and
I'll rephrase because you touched on this, and I kind of want you to have the opportunity to give your corrective suggestions.
Yeah.
What are the issues that you would prioritize for the Libertarian Party, even if you weren't running? Like, what would you advise the next batch of Libertarian candidates to run on as far as issues go, with the goal of, trying to win?
Well, corruption is at the bottom of everything, right? So pick an issue. I mean, and it doesn't even matter what your ideology is. You can be a socialist, you can be a libertarian, you can be an anarchist, anything in between. But it's really the bottom line is that the real problem with any ideology is corruption. So, if we lived in a perfect world, socialism would work, but it can't because of corruption. Communism would work if we were some other species. But we're not. Similarly, when you're talking about free market capitalism, I love free market capitalism. I wrote another book that's basically about anarchy and about how, anarchy could work. And it's a fantasy. It's got dragons and everything in it. So it's a fantasy. But the idea is that anything could work if the people doing it, were right in the head. And that's where, corruption has its root. And so when you have a people who want to cheat other people, like whether it's Medicare fraud or stealing or whatever, you're necessitating government. If you're one of those people that's going to drive in the passing lane slow, then, you're why we have government. So that I've always wanted libertarians to be the ones to point out the corruption and make a big deal about the corruption that Democrats and Republicans can't talk about with a straight face, because their whole system is built on campaign donations that come with strings. So, I've always wanted libertarians to talk about that. But since you brought up president, I guess it's just a good thing to just talk about what the president is actually supposed to do. And this is another thing I wish libertarians would focus on, but because I don't think libertarians read the Constitution more than anybody else, really. And that's where, if they did, they would have a good platform of minimalism that I don't think they understand. If they did, this would be a great compromise. They could be anarchists inside, like I mean, really, I would love it if humans could live without government at all. I'd love it, but we can't, and it's not going to happen. The Constitution is the best compromise that anybody has ever written into law and even attempted to use. So if libertarian, like a presidential candidate, were to point out what his job is to enforce the Constitution, that would give him a platform to say, our military is not supposed to be doing the following things, and really not supposed to be doing much of anything at all.
Well, which would take care of the no new wars crowd, which is on both sides right now. So check.
Yep. So that would be, the fundamentals. Military, I mean, the organization of the military is all unconstitutional, which means that we're always looking for war because we have a professional, permanent organization that depends on that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you're talking about legislation and all of this stuff, he's supposed to be, we've had presidents that have nullified laws before. It happens all the time. So, I mean, for instance, Obama nullified DOMA. Congress passed DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. And basically, what Obama did is what Andrew Jackson did when, he said, Judge Marshall, I don't know, how do you say it? Judge Marshall, something like he said it, but who's going to enforce it? So presidents have always nullified stuff, whether it's a Supreme Court decision, whether it's legislation, because that's their job. They're supposed to enforce only what is constitutional. They are the cop of the Constitution. They're the ones that are supposed to be, stopping people in the streets, like giving them speeding tickets, so to speak, at the federal level. As the president, you are the executive. You're the one who executes the law. So, the president would have a great platform to be talking about none of this stuff is constitutional. The spending, you can talk about taxes and all this stuff you want, but the spending is unconstitutional. If we were to get rid of all the unconstitutional spending, then of course taxes would be a heck of a lot less. And then, we wouldn't be so worried about the taxes or the form of taxation if all of this stuff was, taken out on the spending side. The other part is the income tax itself. There's all kinds of, reasons why, yes, there is a constitutional amendment that does, whether it was properly ratified or not. I know there are arguments, in that regard. And the tax code itself makes it pretty obvious that you can, if you wanted to protest it, you should have a legal, standing. But force is really what runs the government, not law. So there are all kinds of ways where a libertarian should use the Constitution as the platform, which would do two things. First of all, I think it is the best compromise ever, and I think it's a good, workable, proven solution. The other part is it would tamp down the stereotype of libertarians as being like bomb-throwing anarchists, that we want to govern government. We're not anti-government. We just, we want to keep it on a leash. This is a monster. It's a junkyard dog, and you want to keep it in the junkyard. And kind of as simple as that.
Sounds good to me. I would be thrilled if I heard any candidate talking that way. I don't care what side of the political spectrum they're on.
Me too, but that's just it. We don't support people like that. And so the other part to this is that it just in this last election cycle, you're in Indiana, I'm in Indiana. There are an awful lot of really good candidates in the Republican primary who lost to long-term insider bad incumbents. John Hostetler, I mean, I admit he did not run he hardly tried, but he was the last constitutionalist congressman we had. It might have been before your time. You probably don't know.
And the name doesn't ring a bell.
But he was actually he was like the Thomas Massey before Thomas Massey. And he was quite a constitutionalist and a good guy. And It's just that he didn't put in much of an effort, but he would have been by far the best candidate to win in the primary, and people should have known that, but they didn't do their homework, and he didn't put in much of an effort. So maybe that's not the best example, but there are a couple of others like well, I don't need to go through, but like, Buchwald or other people that were like good candidates who should have won and didn't. Why didn't they? Because, Republicans are not doing their homework. I mean, I like to think that libertarians would win, but we have had our own internal problems, and we've, kind of shot ourselves in the foot with, this whole Mises Caucus versus, I don't know what we were calling the other side, but more like the leftist libertarians. Every party, if you get more than 10 people, if they don't fit in a phone booth, there's going to be trouble, and that's where, parties suck anyway. I wish we didn't have to have political parties, but we do have political parties. And I wish that people would vote protest, but they don't, and then there's even a stigma to saying, oh, that's just protest vote. Well, really, what is the point of elections other than to fire people? Politicians will hire themselves if you let them. The whole point of elections is that we're supposed to be able to fire these bums, and we're not doing it, and that's on us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I still feel the intense guilt of not. Technically, he was fired, but I still feel bad about rehiring Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well,
I just thought to myself, I'm like, you know what it was, and I'll just be fully transparent. I bought into the fear mongering. I bought into and the thing is, there's a whole 5 years worth of video catalog where I vehemently disagree on Trump, or I disagree with Trump on certain issues, and then some I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of down. Like my libertarian spirit in terms of the law never really went away, but it got into the fear mongering of like, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was just the idea of a Kamala Harris, and it still is intolerable to me. But the idea of a Kamala Harris administration was so intolerable that I felt, which is stupid because I live in Indiana. I mean, we vote red. I mean, just period. But it worked on me, and I don't feel good about that.
Well, let me just ask it. Just putting another angle on this. Let's just assume that the only difference between Harris and Trump really in action so far, in my opinion, is the border stuff. And okay,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I mean, I think that's correct. That we needed to do something about that. And so I will give him top marks on that. But let's get back to the technocrats for just a second. The very people who voted for Biden before Harris got denied, some of the richest people on the planet, all of a sudden became these Republicans, including Musk, by the way. Pretty much all of the tech bros were, they voted for Biden, and then they're just very enthusiastically now in favor of Trump. My point in that is that this is a puppet show, and that Trump is not in charge of anything. And, does anybody ever say anything bad about Israel without getting consequences for it? So, I mean, I don't want to get into that, just that's a whole separate show, of course. But the point is, they would have done the same thing. Harris and Trump would have been on the same page. They both would have been flexing against Venezuela because we've been doing that forever anyway. They both would have been flexing against Iran because we're told to do that. So it doesn't really matter whether it was going to be Trump or well, Harris was a particular case. I mean, she was there. I think that the Democrats did screw that up pretty bad. But here's another thing. I'm going to just playing heaven's advocate here for a minute. If Harris had won and had done the same stuff that Trump is doing now with all the stuff that we don't like, and she was cackling along the way, which is kind of her way, maybe that would have gotten us out into the street, and maybe we would have resisted it more. Maybe the Republicans wouldn't have been so tolerant of all of this stuff. Maybe Republicans would have suddenly become anti-war. Maybe we wouldn't have passed this,
faster anyway, because there's quite a few of them now that are My thing about Republicans, and I know this is an unfair blanket statement because not all Republicans are the same, but I've always found it very funny that a number of Republicans will get out there and talk about, upholding the Constitution and upholding the rule of law and this, that, and the other. But then when they get power, they go in and do the exact same thing, sometimes worse.
Yep.
But when they do it, it's fine.
Yep. I know, and that's where it's, to me, the GOP. I mean, I've got a lot of GOP friends, and I really would like to see the GOP fix itself. And in fact, if there's a movement inside Indiana right now. I mean, this is kind of an inside thing I'm telling you here. So it's a secret. Shh, don't tell anybody. But we're trying to get a Republican Liberty Caucus going. And I'd love to see that happen. I want to see liberty happening from every angle, from Libertarian, Republican, whatever. I want to see that happen. But right now, I mean, I think we've got a situation where Republicans have become sort of the agent of the Democrats through Trump, and that they have tolerated things that they would not have tolerated. I mean, you listen to their rhetoric when they wanted to elect Trump, and they were anti-war, and we're gonna cut spending, we're gonna do all of this. What happened to those very people? Those very people are among the. I mean, most people are followers; they're not leaders. Most people are not they're not ideological; they're idolatrous. And I mean, I don't mean to just put it in religious terms. It's just a shame we make that all about religion, because it's a very useful political.
I was going to say it's appropriate because
it is.
I've used that expression before, the Trump idolaters, and
we need to use it more often.
Yeah, because it's true. Yeah. There's a reason why it's a sin, by the way. It's up there. It's the big one.
That's the other thing. I think enough people are now talking about evil, and then you've got people like Peter Thiel talking about building the Antichrist. Oh my gosh! I mean, it's important to understand that evil does exist, and that it is amplified through government, and we really need to put a leash on this, and that we have the power to do it. We just have to have the will to do it.
So your prescription is essentially, again, making sure I understand, your prescription is essentially protest, talk, learn, and vote.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in that order or not. I mean,
no specific order.
Yeah, I think most people now know enough. I think the idea that we need to keep teaching other people is a canard. I think we're delaying. There isn't any reason we shouldn't be taken to the streets right now. There are enough of us. There's enough anger. We certainly have the reason to do it. And for us to keep doing the same thing where it's like, well, someday something's going to happen. I mean, we're going to have to, the next generation, or you can't fight city. These things take time. No. We've got to get off our asses now. And I've been doing this for 30 years. I got to pass the baton to other people now at some point. And whenever I hear this boomer stuff, like I said, it's just like, come on, guys, quit doing this. My generation did the same. Most people in my generation are the same as in any generation. Most people don't want to get out and do stuff. Certainly not political. I mean, they'd rather live their lives, and it's perfectly understandable. I've got a million hobbies. I'm building a house right now. I've got dogs behind me right now who wants to play with a toy, and it's kind of wet and gooey, and I really don't want to.
Don't want to partake at this particular moment, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Is what you're saying.
That's what I'm doing. And so, all of us have other things we'd rather do, or other things we have to do. We have families, we've got jobs, and so it's never the case that you can say, this whole generation is bad, this whole generation is good. The fact is, the passionate few have always determined the course of history. Always. There's always a few. And right now, if you were to understand how few people are really running the whole world, you'd be shocked. It's an incredibly tiny number of people.
I think that's becoming more obvious because, like you mentioned corporations more than a few times, and it's becoming pretty obvious how much influence. I mean, Elon Musk is an example, George Soros to kind of poke at the other side, the Koch brothers, and then all the big tech companies that have. I mean, what company Disney just gave $1 billion to OpenAI?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how much Disney, just as an entity, has a say over your life. It's more than you think it is.
Oh, well, you look to see how there are like 6 corporations that control like 90% of everything on the planet. But then you look at to see like how much does BlackRock actually, I mean, how much do they own versus how much do they actually control? Same thing with Vanguard. Same thing with State Street. Some of these corporations don't actually own all of the assets, but they do control them. And you've got organizations like the, WEF, and well, I mean, through the UN and others that they wield tremendous power through a few people. It's if you've got like a Klaus Schwab, who has way more power than he ought to have. I mean, he's not a poor man at all. But he's not like one of the super billionaires. But I mean, the bottom line is that there's an organization between all of these guys that is actually pretty ancient, and each one of them might, be at the head of this snake for a little while, but it's more like a hydra, and one head dies, another one pops up, and the organization is really what we should be going after. And there are very few people at the head of this, but we have to understand the heart of it. I mean, what is the core of this monstrosity? And it's corruption. And it's taking over the institutions that we trust for healthcare, for education, for entertainment, for everything. And so if we were to look to see, where those tendrils are going, whether it's a fast-growing monster, we really can't just delay and hope for, I responded to somebody today who was saying, well, we just have to wait for the boomers to die out before anything can happen. No, you can't. You don't have that much time. And in fact, I'm ready to say, for the first time in 30 years of prognosticating doom, I'm ready to put a date on it. It's going to happen in 2026. We're going to have a major, financial cataclysm, way worse than, the Great Depression. It's going to be way worse because we don't have the systems necessary to support what we did before. We lost the Kiwanis and Rotary clubs and churches that used to be the, sort of the departments of health, education, and welfare. We have become way too reliant on government worldwide. We've become way too reliant on fiat currencies and systems of trade that are highly interconnected and specialized that are going to collapse. And it's going to happen in 2026. So we better get ready. Better get. I have one more recommendation.
Go for it.
Build local communities. Get close to your neighbors. Start having like neighborhood dinners. Get a community garden going. Do stuff like that people used to do to work together as a community, because you're not going to have government to fall back on. It's
So
going to be more enemy.
you think some of those systems are just going to collapse under the strain of the economic disaster?
Well, you think what happened just during COVID. That was a hiccup compared to what's going to happen next. So under COVID, when they were shutting down businesses and schools got shut down, and kids got, their educations got years behind, their social skills got delayed. I mean, all kinds of bad stuff happened just from a couple of years of COVID.
Antidepressant prescriptions went up 64% in children under 16.
Suicide rates, just look at the social cataclysm since COVID. So, I mean, and really you can say that was more or less a test of our compliance, but
I said that when it was happening. I said this because here's the thing, and I'm not a tinfoil hatter when it comes to COVID. Again, this is documented. I wasn't one of the people that was like, I will militantly never wear a mask. I mean, it usually just wasn't worth it wasn't worth the fuss. However, I did say, many things, one of which I still maintain, I said, it's very curious that the small mom and pop grocery store is forced to close, but Walmart is allowed to be open.
Yep.
And it's also very curious to me that churches are closed, but liquor stores are labeled essential services.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
well, but
I'm just saying, it's weird.
But what I think we need to kind of put in perspective here, though, is that with all of that, we still had a monetary system, that we'd already bailed out the banks, which was a stupid thing to do from the 2008, mess that I also predicted, knew was going to. But anyway, the point is, I did not predict that we were going to bail out the banks. That was one thing I got wrong. I didn't think we were going to be that stupid. I didn't, I knew we were going to crash. But in this case, this is going to be bad. And so unlike those previous crashes, we're much more dependent on systems that are just not going to be there. And the monetary system is the key thing that's going to be crumbling, because look at this debt curve. You know what happens with hockey stick graphs. Things like this can't last forever. I'm very pleased with our gold and silver, investments, but I mean, personally, that's worked well for me. But that's not what that means is that we're headed towards major trouble, because gold and silver is not supposed to be an investment. That's supposed to be a hedge. A hedge against what is coming. And what is coming with that, executive order that Trump signed not too long ago is going to be the same kind of thing that FDR signed with some of the same wording, by the way, as when he took the gold. So this time it's going to be crypto and metal money. And we've got to be ready for that, because it's for the same reason, because we have unsustainable debt. And the system is going to crash, and they're going to have to revalue everything. They're just going to have to do what all nations have always done with fiat currencies ever before. Either that or it's total collapse. And in that, we're all going to be suffering. Even as they try to bail themselves out, there's going to be major, major trouble. I think it's too late to fix at this point. So we need to get our community systems re-energized, find a, local fraternal organization, church, something like that to get involved with, because we're going to have to.
To end on a downer note, but like, do you like? Okay, because now I kind of want to dig into this a little bit. Like, do you have an idea of where this is going to start? Like, what sort? Because you mentioned, which executive order specifically are you referring to? Because I don't think I'm familiar.
I have to look up the number, and I made a post of this, and I'd have to look it up on Facebook to see what.
But what's the gist of what it was doing? Does it?
It was supposed to be about cryptocurrency. And it was supposed to, the way they couch things is always to make it seem like freedom for, cryptocurrency, and it's going to be so much better, and we're going to be investing in crypto, and the idea being that we're going to be building a strategic reserve for cryptocurrency, just like a strategic reserve for oil. And they've been buying up crypto, and not even buying it up. They've been seizing it, anyway, they've been seizing a lot of crypto, and they've been buying up gold, and notice how the idea of auditing Fort Knox just kind of quietly disappeared. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. But if you see what the BRICS nations are doing, BRICS, ASEAN, the SCO alliance, all of these things are building up very fast, because the whole world, it kind of went on notice when we seized Russian assets. And it became clear that investing in the United States is really not such a great idea anymore, which is why I think all of this accelerated very fast. And a lot of people wanted to join BRICS. BRICS got their own exchanges going. They're starting to replace the Belgian-based system for exchange of currencies, the SWIFT system. So they've got their own system for exchanging native currencies, so they don't have to use the dollar anymore. De-dollarization has been happening very fast. And this is one of those things people are worried about forever. What happens when people stop having to buy oil with US dollars, when the petrodollar system is challenged? Well, that's already been happening. So kind of a perfect storm. Don't we want to end this on a positive note? Should we sing Kumbaya or something now? Or
well, I'm going to end it with: get your book before your dollar's worthless. go buy Andrew's book before the dollar is worthless. I was pleased to be informed, because I was going to order it, and then I was informed you might not want to do that, because a little birdie told me you might be getting it on the 25th. So I'm like, okay, so I'm cool. Okay, so I'm looking forward to that, because I'm very much looking forward to read it. But I mean, everybody can get your book on Amazon.
Yep, it's called Relighting the Torch. And if you're interested, the other one it's more of an amusing thing. I mean, it's hilarious. It's probably the best book ever written. And it's I think it would be much more enjoyable. I think Relighting the Torch, I try to make it kind of light in so much as what it is. But the other book it's called The Truth About Excelsior, and that's more of a it started out as kind of a kid's story, but me being me, it ended up getting a little bit political, but I think in a fun way. So it does have dragons in it. So there's that. That's, in fact, somebody was just telling me that he's reading it to his kids now. So it can be a kid's book. So buy one for your kids as well.
That's good to hear. So is there any hope or I shouldn't say is there any hope, because there's always hope, however
always hope.
fleeting it may be.
Yeah.
But is there anything the average American can do to prepare for that storm other than what you've already laid out, or is that pretty much it? Just get involved with your neighbors and
That's mostly it. I mean that's always the backdrop. That should be the way things work anyway. And in fact, if you do that even before, ideally, this would be to replace government so we don't need it, and that we would make ourselves, free and happy and prosperous without it. I mean, that is a way to do it. You build networks, you build local communities, you build your own businesses, you build, you find ways to create and to do without having to rely on big ag, big finance, big corporations in general. And that's, I think, doesn't everybody really want to do that anyway?
I was going to say, it sounds like even if we were looking at a potential boom coming, I'd still want to be doing all that.
Well, that's kind of, putting a plug for my other book. That is kind of what the other one is. It's my picture for how society is supposed to work. And I think, between these two, relighting the torch is the legal, that's what we're supposed to be doing just as the United States of America. I mean, just straight up, that's what we're supposed to be. But I think the other book is just kind of a picture. And if people want to have a picture of what, libertarianism or like a functional anarchy or, I shouldn't even use that word anarchy. It's got bad connotation. But, the idea that these people have a king, but the king doesn't do anything. And it's just kind of a fun, people are free to do stuff. And the three major characters are kids. And they're allowed to be kids, and that's where, I'm hoping people will take a look at both of these books and kind of get their own picture of what they would like to see in the world, and then just make that happen.
Well, I will put links for both of them in the description here. So everybody, like I said before, your dollar's worthless. You should buy both of them. So then at least you'll have something to do when you're sitting unemployed in squalor. I'm joking. I'm joking.
In the bread lines.
In the bread line. Yeah, long line. You'll have something to do.
Yeah.
But Andrew, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
But as you said, I'm sure you've got a lot of stuff to do, so I really do appreciate it. And thanks for working with me on the time and scheduling. It's always it's always frustrating to try to do this when you have a day job. And I get it. Evenings are usually people's time to themselves. So again, thank you. And are you going to be on any ballots in 2026?
No. I think I think I got the message after 30 years. You get 2 million people telling you to buzz off in a single day, only so many times, and you start to get the idea that maybe
that's
electoral success is not in my future.
Yeah, but I will say this: if I see your name on a ballot, it will be voted for.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And everybody, like I said, where can people find you if they want more information? If you want people to find you, I understand if you want to stay
I'm easy to find. I mean, you could Google me. I'm on Facebook, on X. I'm easy to find. And then, of course, you can find my books on Amazon. And that's simple enough.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for checking out this episode of the Arete Podcast. Really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe, especially this video. Send it out to all your friends, your family. Send it out to your enemies, too. Like, send it out to everybody. Stand them with it. No, but seriously. And like I said, if you want to get more information on Andrew Horning, he is not hard to find. But we love books on this podcast, so highly recommend getting his books and reading them. I'm looking forward to reading them myself, and we will see you guys in the next episode. But until then, keep making yourselves better.